Welcome. You're listening to the Leading Health Podcast by the Kansas Health Foundation. We have a bold vision to make Kansas the healthiest state in the nation. And it's not just a vision, it's a movement powered by people like you. You are one of the 30,000 Kansans invited to help us shift our state's future. We're your hosts, Ed O'Malley and Susan Kang.
In each episode, we move beyond the usual conversation about health, the doctors and deductibles. Instead, we talk about capital H health, our ability to thrive. This is your invitation to grab the Leading Health book and join the conversation as we work together to make Kansas the healthiest state in the nation.
Welcome back to another episode of Leading Health, the podcast where my colleague and I walk through this book, Leading Health, How You and 30,000 Kansans Help Communities Thrive. Susan, we've been on quite a journey. Today, this is our 5th episode, and we've done a lot of great things. We've covered the idea of capital H health versus lower H health. We have dug into why the 30,000, like who are the 30,000, and why the part they play is so important. Today, we're going to get into talking about Kansas at number 1. Last episode, we described Kansas today. We described what it's like when you're in the bottom half of the states in America's health rankings. Today, we're going to be a little more aspirational. We're going to be a little more idealistic. We're going to be a little more visionary, talking about Kansas at number 1. And of course, the whole big idea behind this podcast and behind this book is to stimulate a conversation among the 30,000 about the part they play in improving health. So, Susan, I'm excited to get into the conversation today. Tee up what we're going to be talking about today.
I am so excited about this chapter because it's bold, it's energizing, it's visionary, right? We went from chapter 4 where we were like, okay, this is where we are. So pragmatism to bold vision in this chapter. So I'm really, really excited about that. And, what we get to paint a picture of what it's like when Kansas is number 1 in the nation, right? Strong economy, thriving families, a workforce that's ready for the future. And our guest, I'm sure, is going to also be interested in, having a workforce that's ready for the future, right? So, okay, we're going to introduce our guest later, but super excited about having Kenny Wilk on our show as well. Okay, so I want you to talk a little bit about some of the really key points in chapter 5 to get us ready to dive into the book, including casting a bold vision.
Yeah, Susan, so let me dive in. So the last chapter, we were pretty blunt about leadership always starts from dissatisfaction. Mm-hmm. And that's true. But this chapter is about the other side of that coin, and that leadership requires this, on one hand, this ruthless balancing of pragmatism, which is kind of what we did last chapter, like what's not working,
right?
What are the problems? Like we have to be able to look honestly at the situation. But leadership also requires balancing that pragmatism with idealism. And this chapter, the title of the chapter is Kansas at number 1. And as you know, I carry these coins in my pocket of our ranking each year. We've gone from 30.
Know that.
I know it's
and
a little
they're
obnoxious.
Not even light; they're heavy.
They're heavy coins, yeah. And it's almost like a penance I'm doing until we get to number 1. Right, I'm going to carry all of them. But so I have the coin for number 31. That was our low watermark on America's Health Rankings. Right. I have the coin in my pocket for number 29. That's the ranking we were when we wrote the book. Okay, then we were 28th the next year. Mm-hmm. And just about 2 months ago, we learned that we were 27th. So I have all 4 of those coins in my pocket. It's a little obnoxious, but we're going to get to number 1. And someday there's going to be a coin that has Kansas at number 1.
Woohoo!
Exactly. We're going to get there. And it's crazy. It's big. It's bold. But all of my experience in Kansas civic life has told me that Kansans can accomplish great things. And it starts with an audacious vision. Like if you don't have that, it's really hard to mobilize people to work together in ways they're not used to working together. And to get to number 1, we're going to have to work together differently, as we know, as we've exploring throughout this book. But Susan, I want to share just a few more things from the chapter. So one of the things that we talk about in this chapter is that we've learned some things from listening to Kansans. And there are three big things that we mention in this chapter that we learned. One of them is that Kansans really do believe we can do better. So 3.5 years ago, we did a lot of listening all around Kansas, asking Kansans about their thoughts about this slide in the health rankings, what they think is going on, and themes emerged. And one of the themes was that they really do believe we can do better, that this aspiration of climbing the health rankings, returning to the ranks of one of the healthiest states, and eventually leading the nation in health, that doesn't feel out of reach for people when we talk about it. Now, it feels a little crazy, a little audacious, but it doesn't feel out of reach when we really talk about it with people.
So what do you think Kansans would say now? So this is years later, after you talk to those Kansans, of us having this bold aspirational goal of leading the nation in health.
Well, that's a great question. I hope they would say, wow, like Kansas Health Foundation is serious. They keep talking about it. It wasn't a flash in the pan. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a one and done conversation. They're building a whole lot of process and structure, a chapter we'll talk about later on. In part 3, we have a chapter about process and structure. Kansas Health, I hope they would say the Kansas Health Foundation is building all kinds of process and structure around that crazy vision of leading the nation in health. And of course, when I use the word crazy, I use that affectionately. Crazy good, not crazy bad. The second thing that Kansans told us as we were listening, that second thing that we lift up in this chapter is that Kansans believe we must be bold. I mean, in countless ways, Kansans have conveyed to me that a lack of bold vision is a barrier to progress, not just on health, but on other things. We've talked about this other times where here in Kansas, we have a little bit of an aw shucks, humble, kind of we're average and darn proud of it mindset.
Yeah, and the Kansas nice.
The Kansas nice thing going on. And I mean, on one hand, that's all great. And that stems from, I think, our heritage and that we can, just kind of work hard and kind of take care of our business and all that kind of thing. And Kansans are saying that that's all fine. But the lack of bolder thinking is actually a barrier to achieving like the dreams we have or the things we would love to have. So we heard that. And then we also heard that Kansans understand that seizing big, bold aspirations is collective work. It has to be done together, right? So we highlight that in this chapter. And then we also talk a little bit about like what would life be like if Kansas was number one in the health rankings. And of course, by now, our listeners know that when we talk about health, we're talking about capital H health, not just healthcare. We're talking about all those things that go into whether somebody is a healthy, thriving individual. And what we did in this chapter is we compared statistically Kansas to New Hampshire. Like New Hampshire is currently number one. They were number one when we wrote this book. And we said, what if Kansas just had the same numbers as New Hampshire in the different submeasures?
Right.
What would that look like? And we got to things like 105,000 fewer Kansans would be hungry. Think about that. We have 3 million Kansans.
Right.
So 100,000 of them is kind of a big number. If we were number one in health, if we just mimicked New Hampshire's numbers, there would be 100,000 people who would not be experiencing food insecurity in Kansas right now. Think about those 100,000. Think about their families. Think about how being food insecure affects their ability to contribute to this economy, affects the ability for their children to grow up in a healthy and whole environment. Right? We also looked at reading, early literacy. If we could just match New Hampshire's numbers, 32,000 more Kansans would be reading at grade level by 4th grade. 32,000 more kiddos would be reading at grade level. That's 32,000 fewer people who will need extra services, who will need extra help in middle school and high school. And of course, lots of the listeners will know there's this correlation between early literacy rates and eventual money spent in the corrections and juvenile justice system. So imagine 32,000 fewer Kansans needing those things. So a couple more, Susan. 173,000 more Kansans would be exercising regularly. I mean, almost 200,000. I'm rounding up. Dad always told me not to let facts get in the way of a good story, right? So almost 200,000 Kansans. Again, we only have 3 million of us. Almost 200,000 more would be exercising like frequently, like all the time. That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal. And I mean, I love that you were painting the picture of what Kansas could look like at number one, actually using numbers.
Yeah. Well,
right?
and
so you have another number to share with us?
I got one more to share,
okay,
which
awesome.
is 183,000 fewer Kansans would be engaging in non-medical drug use. So think about like people like substance abuse and substance abuse disorder. 183,000 fewer Kansans would be engaging in non-medical drug use. Think about what that says about communities and our society and those of us who had loved ones who have battled substance abuse disorder. Mm-hmm. Know that that is often a coping mechanism for a lot of other things. Imagine if 183,000 fewer Kansans needed that coping mechanism. Amazing. Okay, I want to read one final thing. I want to read one thing from this chapter, and then we'll get our guest up here.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, so the final paragraph of this chapter reads, "It's up to the 30,000 whether Kansas leads the nation in health. No one else can focus the energy, resources, and attention to climb all the way to number one. There are conservative and progressive ways of leading health. There are multiple ways forward, but before we debate strategies, we must realize health already is your work, and leading health is your opportunity." We couldn't imagine a better guest to have this conversation with us today. Kenny Wilk is a longtime member of the state legislature, so had a long career there. He was a mentor of mine in the legislature. He had a long career in business at Hallmark Cards while he was in the legislature and prior to serving in the legislature. And since leaving the legislature, he spent a decade and a half at University of Kansas Health System, helping guide their community and governmental work, and is just a dear friend to the Kansas Health Foundation, a mentor and friend to me personally, and a provocative thought partner. So I can't wait to get Kenny up here. Let's get him up here.
Hi, Kenny. I'm so delighted to have you on our podcast today.
And good morning to you, Susan, and I'm delighted to be here.
Okay. Kenny and I go back a long ways when he was in the legislature and when I worked.
We don't have to go through all that.
All right, I'm just saying, but when I was working at KDHE, so it's just really great to have him on the show, and I'm really, really excited for this conversation. So Kenny, you've read this book, right? And you know that the way that Ed starts out this book is around his experience at the health system. Right, where he got to experience like neurosurgery kind of being done and organ transplants and those kinds of things. And he, after in reminiscing about that experience on his way home, it's really dawned on him to understand the difference between capital H health and small h health. So small h health meaning healthcare, and capital H health meaning what we say everything that helps humans thrive, right? So, Kenny, I think because we start out this book and you are at the health system, I'm hoping that you might be able to tell us the importance of distinguishing between health, capital H health, and small h health.
Well, Susan, thank you for that opening question. I'm delighted to speak to that because it moved me. And for the folks listening, it's been a real honor for me to work with Ed on this book. I don't know, it goes back well over a year and a half.
Longer than that now.
Yeah. So I feel like I've kind of been a part of it. And I know there was a reference to this program at one point in the book, but it was further in the book. And then much to my delight and surprise, when I read the final version, when it referenced the experience program in the first paragraph, I was taken aback, but really profoundly moved by it. And I know we had talked about it. So for our listeners this morning, we have a program at the University of Kansas Health System we call Experience the University of Kansas Health System. And it really is about showcasing the care that we're able to provide. So it fits the small h health. And let me say, our folks, we call it an experience because it's not a tour, as you know, Ed. It is a submersion into our culture, our people, our care, and really an opportunity for the folks that deliver that world-class care to actually get to talk to healthy people and show what they do on a daily basis. And it just means the world to them to be able to share that with folks that are coming. We take care of sick people all the time, but we learn through this program, they love having these civic, we have about 20 people come through, they're civic leaders, they're part of the 30,000, and they get to experience this. And when Ed, I believe it was actually your second time.
Yeah, because I went through one of your first versions of it years and years ago. So this is my second time going through that I write about in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you come with the line, I actually wrote it in here, you fear that when we can heal like we heal, it can blind us to what we can prevent.
Yeah.
I think that's a profound point. And it's certainly something that's moved me. I believe it's moving our system. And, and it's important for us to say, hospitals are here to take care. They're here. Health is about health care. It's about healing people. That is our first and primary mission. Yeah. But we have to join in the capital H health, the ability to thrive. That's really what we're trying to do. We want to heal people, get them out and keep them healthy. But really grasping the capital H health, the ability to thrive and not need the kinds of expensive health care that much of which is preventable. And I love when you talk about the graphs and the angles up and really changing our focus to get back to the beginning of that graph and preventing some of these things going on.
Susan, you and I have talked about this elsewhere on this podcast, but we don't want to minimize the critical importance of lower H health, like of health care, and like what the hospital with the University of Kansas health system and our other hospital and clinical friends are doing across Kansas is absolutely critical. And it's just not enough, though, to help Kansas go from a low point of 31 in their rankings, 29 when we wrote the book, 27 today. It's not enough to help us go up to number one. Like, it won't help us get there. It'll be critical. It'll change the lives of people who are sick, but we've got to get people healthy to begin with. So I hope it never comes across, Kenny, as us diminishing the importance of health care as we're on this journey to overall health.
I don't think it does at all. And maybe another number, I love the numbers that you put in the book, but I think it's a number important for people to understand. On any given year, 7 to 8% of the population will have an inpatient experience with the hospital, right? A lot of people think it's a lot more than that. So 92 to 93% of the population never go to an inpatient, which is a wonderful thing. We want to drive that. And in fact, if you back out and you ask that question, how many people under the age of 65 have an inpatient, it drops dramatically. We want to keep that dropping, okay? But that's what hospitals are there to do. But I believe you're seeing hospitals embrace the capital H and do a better job. You see that kind of first and foremost in the number of people that are getting outpatient care now, the technology. So there's a lot of things all helping to drive this and really help us all to thrive more without having those inpatient experiences.
Kenny, so I want to go back to casting our vision, right, to become number one in the nation in health. In order to do that, we talk about having to cast a bold vision, right? And I'm curious to know, can you share a time where you cast a bold vision, but that felt risky?
Well, yes, and it's something I don't talk a lot about, but I can certainly point today to some things that have materialized. And I would take you back to the early 2000s when I was in the legislature. I'd been there for a while. We won't get into all the history there, but I'd always had a strong interest in research and development, economic growth, and put together with a coalition of folks what we called the Kansas Economic Growth Act. It then formed the Bioscience Authority, and it led to National Cancer Institute designation. It led to the landing of NBAF.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, actually.
There was actually significant funding that went to NIAR through some other companion legislation, and we wanted to drive the biosciences. And I mentioned today, we actually, when we started out that initiative, and it was something I felt really strong about, worked with Nick Jordan, many others, there's a lot of folks that were involved in that. But when we started that, we were focused on life sciences. And we pretty quickly realized in order to make it work, and we actually had kind of pulled a number out of the air, we said, hey, this is going to be like a $500 million initiative. And if you want to be part of it, come join the team. If that number scares you, then that's okay. Susan, as you might suspect, a lot of people did not want to be part of that, but there was a lot of people that did. And that was one of my first lessons. People really do want bold visions. But we had to move from life sciences to biosciences. Now, today, biosciences is pretty well understood. At the time, when we started using the term biosciences, people were like, what are you talking about? Nick and I literally traveled all over the state. There was not an invitation that we turned down, not a group that we wouldn't go talk to. And we had worked with, at the time it was K-Tech, to cast the vision of what we thought Kansas could look like with this 10, 20-year commitment towards the biosciences. And today, it's one of the things I've learned, and what KHF has and what Ed has in his book here is a long-term vision. These things are not going to happen overnight. You actually have to kind of measure them. You got to measure them as frequently as you can, but it's going to be a decade's journey.
I just want to add in a couple quick things just for folks who are listening. So you mentioned Nick Jordan, so former state senator, Nick Jordan from Johnson County, from Shawnee, if I remember correctly.
That's correct, yeah.
The two of you teamed up on that. And you also mentioned K-Tech, which was it no longer exists, but it was a public-private state kind of organization designed to spur entrepreneurship and investment and connect with angel investors and all sorts of great things. And to me, I bring those clarifications up just because I think what your story is reminding us is that the players will change, right? So like Nick Jordan and Kenny Wilk are no longer in the state legislature. K-Tech is no longer an organization, but there are other individuals and there are other organizations that have emerged and carried the mantle forward of helping Kansas be in the vanguard of bio and life sciences. And so I think it's a good thing for us to remember that like the people, the players, the organizations will change, but if the vision is bold enough, if it's audacious enough, and if the strategy is smart enough, it'll carry on, even if the players and the organizations change over time.
Agree. And, so Susan, I just jotted down vision. And I think a lot of people, what is a vision? A vision is imagining what you cannot see. Imagining what you cannot see.
I love that, Kenny.
And that's what I see KHF doing in leading help. You're helping us imagine what the future can be. And I find that inspiring. And you have to keep repeating it over and over and over and over. And as it begins to become into focus, then it becomes like the flywheel, right? It can really take off.
We talk, Susan, in the book that it's risky, right?
Right.
Casting bold visions is risky, but we're an endowed foundation. Like if we can't take a risk with casting a bold vision, who the heck can? Who can do that? So we're doing it, and we're proud to do it, and we believe we can pull it off too. So lots more to talk about in this chapter.
So in the book, we talk about sort of moving from concern to aspiration, where sort of a community might be stuck talking about a problem, but then they need some help to shift their energy toward a possibility, where they could cast a bold vision themselves. How do we do that without minimizing their concerns? Like, we don't want people to be just like in the weeds all the time, just complaining about what is going on, right? How do we help people cast, this bold vision, but also giving credence and giving a nod, to the stuff that they're suffering from? Does that make sense? How do you do that?
It makes perfect sense, and I think it's always important, Susan and Ed, and I know Ed is practiced. I think Kate, we have to listen.
Mm-hmm.
But you really, and when I say listen, I mean really listen, not just hear, but really listen. And it's something I've tried to work on. I continue to try to work on to get better. But at some point, you say, okay, I'm listening, I hear you, I understand, but I've been one, particularly when I have had the privilege of and honor of having some roles that are authoritarian, leadership roles, whatever you might want to call them. I would challenge people, I'll listen to you, I want to understand, but bring me your ideas. Bring me your solutions. I don't care if you think it's a bad idea. And if we start getting into ideas, Ed and I, people often say, well, what do you and Ed talk about? I said, well, we talk about all kinds of things. And man, we generate all kinds of ideas. But that's how you start, Susan. Bring your ideas, bring your solutions. And if you get the right people involved and you take the right time, you got the right processes, I find you can come up with something, whether it be a long-term or just something even in the short term to start making progress on these daunting challenges. But if you're part of the 30,000, you need to be thinking, and you need to be bringing your ideas forward, and you need to be talking to as many people and bringing some collective ideas to the table.
Mm-hmm. And so by listening, right, really listening, you keep these people engaged, right, around the problems, and that helps them to come up with their own ideas and to cast a vision. Is that what I'm hearing?
I believe that, and frankly, I've learned over the years, sometimes, I've had a lot of folks, particularly when I was on the Board of Regents, we would just listen to folks, whatever school it might be, whatever issue they might have. When we just really listened, they just felt better for having told us, and that was a great lesson. They'd move on and, but they felt heard.
They felt hurt. And Kenny, you have been so involved in Kansas civic life. The fact that you were chair of the Board of Regents slipped my memory as I gave the brief introduction of you. So just another example of the wealth of experience you have. On this topic we're talking about right now, we write in this chapter, it's an exercise of leadership to cast a vision. It's especially important for the 30,000 to cast a vision. That vision should be informed by listening deeply to stakeholders and should reflect their hopes and dreams. But ultimately, it takes someone with authority, credibility, and standing in a community, organization, or system to cast a vision. One of my mentors, Marty Linsky, who, a prolific writer on leadership and heavily involved in civic life, member of the Massachusetts legislature decades ago, worked for 2 governors in Massachusetts. Marty likes to talk about that one of the roles of authority is to provide direction. It's like a function of authority. And that's what we're talking about with vision, that the 30,000 as a collective, and we are clearly hoping more of the 30,000 will help us cast this vision for Kansas to lead the nation in health. But even in their own way, a member of the 30,000 might be the executive director of the community foundation in their community, or she might be the CEO of the local bank, or she might be the mayor of the town, and knowing that part of your role is to cast vision, that it's something about the authority you hold gives you the ability to hold people's attention and say, it's that hill we should take versus that hill. Now, you have to have listened really, really well to know that the people want to take a hill, or that taking one of these hills is important to the people. And you shouldn't assume you know the best way to take that hill. But casting that vision is what we need the 30,000 to do. And so I love this conversation. And I love that you all are talking about anchoring the vision in listening, which is so critical.
Yeah. And, so the other thing that we talk about in this chapter is this notion that when you do cast a vision, it invites scrutiny. So, for us, we've cast this audacious, bold vision of leading the nation in health. That you can bet your bottom dollar that we're inviting scrutiny around that, right? I mean, some people might be like, what? What are you talking about? How are you going to, be number one? That is a bold vision. As far as I'm concerned, without actually casting such a vision, we will never get there, right? You have to have the audacity to be able to actually cast that vision. So that's partly why I'm here, working at KHF. The book also talks about the bolder the vision, the tougher the scrutiny, which kind of makes sense, right? There's more to take apart. So how do you, so in your position, as you cast bold visions, how do you stay steady sort of, and maybe keeping others steady, especially on your team, when progress is slow and criticism sometimes can get loud?
Susan, I would say, and I think this is really important, so we're talking about the 30,000. Those are the folks that really need, they're in the positions, positions of authority. But let's not forget, 30,000 is made up of one person at a time. So it really starts as us as an individual. So if I want to be part of this journey, I, Kenny Wilk, need to buy off on the vision. Mm-hmm. I need to be convinced before I can really start convincing others. And you asked the question, how do you stick with it when it gets tough? Because I've had some really challenging stuff. And, I've suggested to the folks that, I invite to the table, and I would suggest to the 30,000, each of us needs to really spend some time and buy into the vision. And then you need what I call this quiet confidence without conceit. A quiet confidence. You got to be confident in what you're doing. You have to believe it as an individual. I have found, Susan, that's contagious. That's contagious. You don't be conceited. Don't talk down to people, but people are looking for that confidence. And then the other thing I would tell you is, and I have found this over time, so we listen. You need to listen. But at some point in time, somebody's got to make a decision. And folks are fearful, I think, because of the risk, because of maybe the lack of confidence. They don't want to make a decision. What do I mean by that? Decide to do something. Decide to do something.
Yeah.
Just see what's going to happen. And that's what folks, the 30,000, the folks that are privileged to be in these roles, that's what we're able to do. If you don't get it right, that's okay. See what you learn, back up and start again. But that's what people are looking for. They're looking for people to give them the confidence, make a decision, go forward, and make some progress.
Kenny, you've been involved in civic life for a long time. And I would I'd love to hear you riff on, imagine Kansas is the healthiest state in the nation. Imagine like we're number one. And you chaired the Kansas House Tax Committee, the Economic Development Committee. You chaired the Kansas Board of Regents. You've been in the private sector. You've been in the public sector. The hospital is a nonprofit. You're in the nonprofit sector. Kansas at number one. Just talk about, what do you think it'd be like?
I love how you paint the picture, and I love how you use the numbers, and I think that's something we all need to continue to do. And I would invite us all to think about, what if my community led the state in being number one? It could impact even my community. But when our state becomes number one, it'll be interesting. Number one, I understand it's going to take years, but we're making progress, right? And frankly, Ed, I'm a little embarrassed. Susan, I'm a little embarrassed because I started in the legislature in 1993. And it wasn't long after that, I realized we were ranked, I believe, didn't we top out at number 8 or number 9?
Number 8.
Yeah.
Number 8.
Number 8 in 1991.
And you know what? I'm embarrassed to say we didn't pay enough attention to it. We did not pay enough attention to it. And look what happened. Over the 30 years, we've just continually slipped. And that has come, today I can tell you with my experience, that comes at great expense. So the things you were talking about there, the young children learning to read, would have a profound impact on our state in so many ways. It would impact incarceration rates. It would impact a lot of the social costs. That's what we've got to understand with this vision. When these 180,000 people that would be less off drugs.
183,000.
You are talking tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in shifted costs that wouldn't be there. I think we would be the envy of the country. And then all of a sudden, the free enterprise folks, which are most people in Kansas, you'd have people wanting to come to Kansas. We want more people in Kansas. We need more people in Kansas. That would be the magnet. And it would have happened. It will happen. And it'll be fun because we'll have to keep educating, because the people that are actually experiencing it in the 12 to 15 years, they may not understand how hard it was to get there. It'll be our job to make sure they know how hard it was to get there and how hard it's going to be to stay there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
true.
Ed, I'm going to interject for a minute because you're talking about, strong economy. Will you talk a little bit about the research that our think tank did around the economic case for health?
Yeah, Kenny, I don't know if you've seen this or not yet, but we put out some research recently where our research team, did a scan of about 1,000 different academic articles that were written about the connection between health and economic output. Okay. And then they narrowed that search down to like a couple hundred articles that they really dug into, and then did some theming of those articles. And what they found was amazing. And like, first of all, we all know that the biggest determinant of your health is your economic status. We know that, right? You know that, we know that. That's pretty well documented. This research looked the other way around. It said, but what's the impact of health on economic output? And so at one level, it was kind of obvious. The research shows a healthy individual has more economic output. The healthier you are, the more successful you're going to be financially, economically. That kind of makes sense. Like you don't have to take sick days. You can go to work. You can so. But they also found that the healthier a company's workforce, the greater impact on P&L for the company, which kind of makes sense when you think about it, right?
Well, yeah, you're seeing companies all over the country follow that.
Exactly.
Exactly. They've got the numbers internally.
Right. And then they also found, this research also found that the healthier a state's population, the greater the GDP for that state. So that like health isn't just an outcome, it's a driver, and it's a driver of economics, And so what I love about thinking about Kansas at number one, and again, Kenny, you were one of my mentors, and I was on the taxation committee with you as a young legislator. When I was a young legislator, I was on the economic development committee with you. I was ingrained to think about, because of you and other mentors like Mary Birch at the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce, I was ingrained to think about the importance of healthy economic activity. And one thing I love about the idea of Kansas at number one is if Kansas is at number one in the health rankings, our economy is going to be on fire in a good way. And I love that.
And that begins then to help solve a lot of other problems and challenges that we have.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to like win the football game, but our team is injured, not healthy, not at their best, right? We're trying to win the economic game in our country and our world, but we don't have a healthy team. Like our team is one of the least in the lower half of the healthy teams meaning like the population of our state. If we want to grow Kansas, if we want to succeed economically, we have got to become a healthier place. It's like a football team knows, a basketball team knows, a soccer team knows the health of your players is a major influence on the success you're going to have on the field, on the court. It's the same for us.
Yeah, I've not seen that report, but I'd love to get a copy of that.
We're more than happy to provide you with a copy of that report.
It just makes so much sense, right?
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense.
I mean, right? The components, the things that, and so to my, so I don't use sports analogies. I'm going to just use like a building construction analogy. Right? You have to have the constituent sort of like the foundational pieces in good shape in order for the house to be built on, right? I mean, and for companies to be successful, it's the people, it's the biggest capital asset that workforces that companies have are its people. And if they're not doing well, if they're not healthy, right, both physically and mentally, then there's not a company to speak of, let alone succeed. So,
Susan, we start the book literally right before we talk about the University of Kansas health system. We have a quote from Winston Churchill: "Healthy citizens are the greatest asset any country could have." That's, I think, what you're talking about.
I love it.
Susan,
I forgot about that quote.
Take us out. What should we close with today on this episode?
So I'm going to go around and ask you guys for your takeaways from today's conversation. So one takeaway for me is the idea of casting this bold vision. We've been talking about this, and we know that it involves risk and it involves a scrutiny. And I invite our listeners to figure out an area in their work or even in their personal lives that is important enough to cast a bold vision around, that you can't afford not to cast a bold vision around. That is what I encourage people to do. And Kenny, would you go next and tell us what your biggest takeaway is from today's conversation?
I'm glad that we've spent this time talking about the vision, because that can be something hard for people to wrap their head around, but I think it's so important. And Susan, I couldn't agree more. I would invite the listeners of this program to really re-examine the vision and really what it means for Kansas to be number one. Spend a little time looking at the numbers. Maybe think about what are the numbers that would be most meaningful to you. But then, just as you said, as an individual, what can I do to make a difference each and every day? And if each of us will do that, think of the power, if each of the 30,000 just started taking some meaningful steps, that's what's going to move the flywheel.
Yeah, mine's similar to what Kenny just said. I would love, with all my mind, is like for members of the 30,000, like cast your version of a capital H health vision for your company, for your organization, for your community. I mean, maybe it's for your company to win the healthiest workplace award by the whatever organization in your town that does things like that, or to have 90% or 100% of your team say that their organization helps them be their healthiest version of themselves, or just cast some kind of capital H health vision to help us with this idea of Kansas leading the nation in health.
And Susan, can I jump in one other thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely, Kenny.
Because Ed and I were talking about this last night. So what we're talking about going from 31 to 1. And I think it's important to know, and Ed and I talked about this, and I know we're going to keep it going. We're not going to go from 31 to 1, but we're making progress, and we're going to celebrate. And I want to just take a second and say that's going to be important. As we make progress as a state, as we make progress as communities, we want to know about that, because we want to come to these communities. KHF is doing a great job at your meetings of celebrating the progress, but we're going to get out into communities, and when communities are making progress, we're going to celebrate that win and reinforce what we're doing, and that'll feel good for people. That will feel good. So we're not in this to not celebrate and really enjoy because we can enjoy the moments as we make progress here. And we've done a good job. Our hospital started out about as far down as you could start. Today, we're one of the best health systems in the country. But we've done a good job of rewarding and celebrating and have found that really makes a difference. And I believe we'll be doing that all across our state with this initiative.
Kenny, I know we're going to have you back on a future episode. The next one you come back for is going to be a few weeks down the road when it airs, and it's about assumptions. And I would love to dig into the story that you just referenced about the University of Kansas health system and the journey it's been on during that episode.
Let's do it. I look forward to it.
I love it. Awesome conversation. Love the note about celebrating. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. The next conversation, we are going to begin to head into part 2 of the book. And part 2 is where we say, hey, we think this is a health challenge. It's actually not a health challenge. It's a leadership challenge. So I look forward to sharing more about that on our next episode. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening today. Before we leave, there are a couple ways you can help. The first, visit kansashealth.org/leadinghealth to claim your copy of the book and join in the efforts as we work together to make Kansas the healthiest state in the nation. The second is to share this podcast with your network. Also, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment from whatever platform you use to get your podcast.